Imagine walking into a store with the intent to steal, thinking you'll be in and out before anyone notices. But when you get caught, what happens next isn't what you expect. Instead of flashing lights and handcuffs, you're led into a room where your life changes forever. This is the story of a store that made a bold decision, one that left both the shoplifters and the community speechless. It all started when Mike, the owner of a small neighborhood convenience store, realized that something was broken. Week after week, shoplifters would come in and out of his store, taking small things like snacks, batteries, even some higher ticket items like electronics. And each time it happened, the response was always the same. Call the police, file a report. Maybe the person gets arrested, maybe not. But no one really learned anything from it. The cycle just kept repeating. Mike was tired of it. Not just the theft, but the hopelessness behind each act. He knew that most of these people weren't stealing out of malice. They were desperate. They had families to feed or bills they couldn't pay. There were teenagers trying to fit in, or adults who felt like they had no other option. He knew calling the cops wasn't solving the problem. It was just perpetuating it. That's when Mike decided to do something different, something risky. One cold afternoon, a teenage boy named Jason walked into the store. He was fidgety, looking around, pretending to browse the shelves. But Mike, who had been running the store for years, could see it coming a mile away. Jason slipped a couple of candy bars and a soda into his jacket pocket and made a beeline for the exit. But before he could leave, Mike stepped in front of him. Jason froze, expecting Mike to pull out his phone and call the cops, just like he'd seen happen before at other stores. His heart was pounding, his face flushed. He was sure he'd end up in the back of a police car by the end of the day, but Mike didn't call the police. "Follow me," Mike said calmly. There was no anger in his voice, no accusation, just a strange calmness that Jason wasn't used to. Jason followed Mike to the back of the store where there was a small office. His mind was racing. What was going to happen? Was he about to get a lecture or worse? But when they got to the office, what he saw left him confused. Mike sat down behind his desk and motioned for Jason to sit down too. He pushed a cup of coffee towards the boy, who hesitated before sitting down. The tension in the room was palpable. "I'm not going to call the cops," Mike began, "but we need to talk about why you're doing this." Jason didn't know what to say. No one had ever asked him why before. People just assumed he was a bad kid, a troublemaker. But the truth was, he didn't want to steal. He didn't want to be this person. And that's when something amazing happened. Mike didn't give him a lecture. He didn't shame him. Instead, he asked Jason to work in the store for a few hours to pay off what he had stolen. But it wasn't just about working off the debt. It was about teaching responsibility, respect, and the value of what he had taken. The boy reluctantly agreed, not knowing what else to do. As he worked stocking shelves and cleaning up, Mike took the time to talk to him. Really talk to him. He found out that Jason lived with his single mom, who was working 2 jobs just to keep food on the table. He wasn't stealing because he wanted to. He was stealing because they didn't have enough money for the basics, and he was ashamed to ask for help. Mike's heart sank. This was exactly what he had suspected. Over the next few hours, the two of them talked about life, about making better choices, and about asking for help when you need it. Mike wasn't there to judge Jason. He was there to guide him. When Jason's shift was done, Mike didn't just send him home. He handed him a bag filled with groceries. and essentials for his family. "Take this," Mike said, "and if you or your mom ever need anything, come talk to me. Don't steal, just ask." Jason was stunned. He couldn't believe what had just happened. Mike wasn't angry. He wasn't punishing him. He was helping him, showing him a better way. Jason left the store that day, not just with groceries, but with a new sense of hope. For the first time, he felt like someone cared. And that wasn't an isolated incident. Mike's new policy became something of a legend in the neighborhood. Word spread quickly that this small convenience store didn't call the cops on shoplifters, but instead offered them a second chance. And what Mike found was shocking. The thefts began to decrease. People who would have otherwise stolen from him began to approach him directly, asking for help, for advice, or even for a small job to earn what they needed. It was a complete turnaround. There was one incident that stood out above the rest. It involved a young woman named Sarah. She had been through a lot: an abusive relationship, homelessness, and job loss. She wandered into Mike's store one rainy afternoon, soaked and hungry. Out of sheer desperation, she grabbed a few items and tried to walk out, but Mike caught her. She was terrified, expecting the worst. But Mike did what he always did. He invited her into the office, sat her down, and asked her story. As she poured out her heart, Mike listened. He didn't judge, he didn't scold, he just listened. Sarah explained that she had nowhere to go, no money, and no hope. She was stealing just to survive. Mike, moved by her story, did more than just let her work off the items she had taken. He connected her with a local shelter and even helped her find a job. Sarah's life changed that day. She went from being on the brink of losing everything to having a new start. And it was all because Mike chose to show compassion instead of calling the cops. Mike's store became known not just for its products, but for its philosophy: second chances. He had created an environment where people who had made mistakes could find redemption, where they were treated with dignity, not handcuffs. His unique approach caught the attention of other local business owners, who started to adopt similar policies. The entire community began to change. People began to support Mike's store more than ever. They appreciated what he was doing, and many customers would buy extra items just to help him keep his second chance fund going. Mike didn't just run a store. He built a community, one based on kindness, empathy, and respect. But as with all good things, there were challenges. One day, a group of teens tried to take advantage of Mike's leniency. They stole a large amount of inventory, assuming they would just be asked to work it off. But this time, Mike had to draw the line. He called a meeting with the teens and their parents, explaining that while he believed in second chances, there were limits. They couldn't treat his kindness as a weakness. The parents were furious at first, but when Mike explained that his policy was about teaching responsibility, not encouraging theft, they began to see the bigger picture. The teens were made to not only work off the stolen items, but also participate in community service, helping out at local shelters and food banks. It wasn't about punishment. It was about learning the consequences of their actions. So why did Mike's approach work? It's simple. He treated people like humans, not criminals. He understood that most people who steal aren't bad. They're desperate, and instead of making their lives harder, he gave them a way out. He helped them see that there were other options, better options. And what's even more amazing, his store thrived. He didn't lose business because of theft. In fact, the opposite happened. People respected him more. They supported him more, and his store became a symbol of hope in a world that often feels hopeless. If this story has moved you in any way, if you believe in second chances and the power of kindness, then hit that like button and subscribe. There are more stories out there like this, and together we can shine a light on them. And don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments below. How do you think we can make our community stronger, just like Mike did?